The message blinked on the main screen of the TFS Stormbreaker, a single line pulsing in angry red. Surrender all extrasolar colonies within 48 hours or face eradication. Beneath it, the seal of the Zephyrian Empire flickered 4 intersecting claws around a burning star. It had no signature. It needed none. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the center of the bridge, the dim blue lighting casting shadows across his face. His jaw was tight, unreadable. Behind him, the asteroid field loomed jagged black shapes in the silence of space. The Stormbreaker had been hidden here for 3 weeks, buried deep in a warren of rock and dust, invisible to most sensors. But the time for hiding was coming to an end. Jake read the message again, not because he needed to, but because some part of him hoped the words might change. "Captain," said Lisa Bennett, walking up from the engineering console, her hands still streaked with oil and synthetic graphite. "She's ready. All systems green. Reactors stable. Every secret weapon is primed and hungry." Jake didn't turn to face her. "Including the ones we're not supposed to have?" Lisa gave a thin smile. "Especially those," he nodded once. Quiet approval, no smile. "Tony," he said, voice low but clear. "Enemy numbers?" Tony Rodriguez tapped a few keys. The weapons officer's voice was calm, clinical, precise. "Confirm 212 ships, 4 dreadnoughts, 12 heavy cruisers. The rest are destroyers and support craft." Jake exhaled slowly. "That's more than we expected." Tony didn't look up. "Yes, sir. But none of them know what this ship really is." Silence stretched across the bridge like tension on a drawn bow. The 20 crew members present didn't flinch. They had trained for this. Most had volunteered, without knowing why. Now they knew. From her console, Amy Foster swiveled in her seat. "Message from Earth, sir." "Ambassador Parker." "Put her through." The screen changed. Ambassador Helen Parker appeared, her face pale and strained. Behind her stood the gray spires of the United Nations Orbital Assembly. Through a window, Earth hung like a jewel, fragile and unaware. "They've made their decision," she said, skipping pleasantries. "The Galactic Council has sided with the Zephyrians. They say we've grown too fast, that we don't belong beyond our own star." Jake's jaw clenched. "Did they mention the ruins?" Helen nodded, weary. "They didn't say it outright." "Yes. Ever since we found those structures on Vega Prime and the Marnes Belt, the alien governments have been nervous. They're afraid of what we might uncover." "They should be," Jake muttered. Helen's voice softened. "Jake, if this goes wrong, Earth doesn't have the ships to stop them. You'll be the only line between them and our colonies." He didn't respond. The screen went dark. Footsteps echoed on metal as Dr. Paul Wright stepped onto the bridge. His hair was more gray than brown now, his eyes sharp despite the years. He looked at Jake with the kind of steady confidence that only came from losing everything and surviving anyway. "The crew's ready," he said. "Every last one of them." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Even knowing what we're up against?" "They're angry," Paul said. "That's dangerous." Jake turned and looked out through the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, a fleet was preparing to burn Earth's children from the sky. And they were doing it because humans dared to grow, dared to ask questions, dared to reach for their past. He spoke softly, but every crew member heard it. "Then we'd better give them a reason to be scared." They came out of the void like gods, elegant, gleaming, and absolutely certain of their victory. The Zephyrian fleet filled the space around Jupiter, ships sliding into formation with predatory grace. Their crystalline hulls shimmered in the gas. Giant swirling storms, reflecting amber lightning in fractal bursts across their curved surfaces. 212 warships, shaped like blades, fangs, and winged symbols of conquest honed over millennia of galactic domination. They had crushed worlds with less, but they had never faced the Stormbreaker. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the forward platform of his bridge, surrounded by silent officers. Beyond the armored glass of the main viewport, Jupiter loomed massive, majestic and uncaring. And scattered in its orbit like scattered bones were the Zephyrian dreadnoughts, their command signals crackling through space. "They've taken position," said Danny Kim from Tactical, his voice tense but focused. "Heavy. Units are anchoring near Ganymede. Their forward scouts are already pinging the asteroid belt for decoys." Jake said nothing. He was watching a single dot on the screen, the Stormbreaker's location, still masked by a cluster of mining debris and sensor jammers. But the mask wouldn't last long. "They're hunting," said Amy Foster at the AI systems console. "Not scanning, hunting. Their formation's tight, but their lead ships are fanning out. Standard pattern for extermination." Lisa Bennett stood at Jake's side, arms crossed. "They're not here to conquer. They're here to cleanse, just like they said they would." Jake's voice was calm. "Then we give them something to remember." He turned toward communications. "Beth, open a channel to the fleet." Beth Turner nodded, tapping her panel. "You're live, sir." Jake stepped forward, his voice ringing across space. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Federation ship Stormbreaker. You have entered human space without permission. Withdraw your fleet immediately. This is your only warning." Seconds passed. Then the screen shifted, replaced by the visage of Admiral Kether of the Zephyrians. His skin was a smooth, iridescent green-blue, textured like snake scales dipped in molten glass. 4 golden eyes blinked slowly. When he spoke, his voice was smooth and cold, like silk stretched over broken glass. "Captain Morrison," he said, with the tone of a teacher addressing a misbehaving child, "your courage is admirable. But this is not a battle. It is an execution. Surrender, and I may spare your crew. Resist, and your name will be forgotten with the rest of your failed species." The connection cut. No negotiation. No delay. Only war. "Contact flares," Danny called. "They're firing full spread. Missiles incoming. Energy beams charging." Jake didn't flinch. Tony Rodriguez was already moving. Kinetic accelerators hot. Quantum payload standing by. Defensive net online. "Lisa?" "Reactors at 98%. If we push harder, we might tear a hole in the fabric of space." Jake smiled faintly. "Let's tear it." The asteroid shell around the Stormbreaker evaporated in a flash of motion. 1,000 tons of rock vaporized as the massive ship emerged like a beast unchained. Over 2 kilometers of obsidian hull warship streaked with glowing engine lines, plasma veins pulsing like veins. The Zephyrians didn't even blink. They fired first. Twin lances of blue energy slammed into the Stormbreaker's forward shields, lighting the bridge with a flash of unnatural light. The ship groaned, but held. Then came the missiles, hundreds, each with its own AI, each programmed with 10,000 paths to kill. A normal ship would be ash already, but the Stormbreaker was not normal. "Tony," Jake said, his voice as calm as a sea before a hurricane. "Remind them who we are." The kinetic railguns fired. No light, no heat, just mass and velocity. Tungsten rods 5 meters long, wrapped in magnetic sheaths, launched at 15% of light speed. They weren't weapons. They were physics. And physics didn't negotiate. The first Zephyrian destroyer was obliterated in a flash of silence. A rod punched through its shield, its hull, and its reactor core, leaving a glowing hole so clean it could have been designed. The ship broke in two like glass struck by a hammer. Seconds later, 5 more followed. The bridge was lit by sensor flashes. "Direct hits," Tony said. Shields are useless against kinetic impact at this speed. Quantum torpedoes away, Amy added. Phase sync complete. They're slipping past the energy barriers like they're not even there. Missiles detonated inside Zephyrian hulls. Beams of compressed particle fields surged through seams in ships never designed to defend from within. 16 confirmed. Kills, Beth called out, in under a minute. Jake nodded, his gaze steady on the collapsing enemy formation. Keep pressing. But the Zephyrians weren't beaten. Not yet. The dreadnought surged forward, heavy plasma batteries lighting. Up space like a dying star. Multiple lances struck the Stormbreaker, rippling its shields, making its hull groan with the force of artificial suns. Shields at 72%, Lisa reported. But we can take more. Jake's hands gripped the rail. Then give them more. The Stormbreaker fired again fusion lances now, wide-beam plasma cutters scaled from mining rigs, slicing through alien armor like melted wax. Zephyrian ships twisted, fell, and exploded, crystal fragments glinting in the black. But as the Zephyrian fleet faltered, something shifted. Amy stared at her screen, confused. Captain, she said slowly, the enemy command signals, some are switching frequencies. Masked protocols. There's another layer beneath their fleet orders. Jake turned. Meaning what? They weren't just here to destroy us. They were watching us, measuring. Beth's eyes widened. Someone's listening in. Not? The Zephyrians, something else. That was when Dr. Susan Lee's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, I've finished the analysis of the energy residue from their beam weapons. It matches the signal signatures from the ruins on Vega Prime. Jake's breath caught. They're using ancient tech. No, she said. They're using our tech. Ancient human tech repurposed. The bridge fell silent. Then Jake whispered. The one thing no one else wanted to say, they've known who we were all along. The Stormbreaker spun through the burning wreckage of the Zephyrian fleet, triumphant. But behind the victory, a greater danger had emerged, not in fire, but in forgotten memory. The silence after battle was never quiet. The wreckage of the Zephyrian fleet still burned in Jupiter's shadow, drifting like shattered bones around its moons. Plasma fires flared silently, tiny dying suns licking against twisted crystal hulls. Some pieces were as small as shrapnel. Others were the size of apartment blocks, glowing with residual energy. Scorched and cracked. But the most important thing wasn't what remained. It was what was missing. Admiral Kether's flagship had vanished. Captain. Jake Morrison sat in the war room of the Stormbreaker, staring at a hollow projection of the battlefield. Red tags marked confirmed kills. Blue represented ships that had attempted retreat. But one icon, golden and flickering, hung unresolved. Kether's dreadnought had been targeted, 3 rods, 2 torpedoes, all confirmed impact. It should have been a tomb. It wasn't. Cloaking? Asked Tony Rodriguez, arms folded. Impossible, said Amy. Not by Zephyrian standards. They use refractive shields, not full-space cloaking. That kind of tech belongs to... She trailed off. Jake finished her sentence. Something older. There was a knock, unnecessary but respectful, and the door slid open. Dr. Susan Lee entered, cradling a crystalline tablet layered in interface glyphs. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes haunted. I need to show you something, she said. The table flickered. An image of a ruin appeared, massive, circular, half buried beneath a crimson desert. The pillars were cracked, the walls scarred by time, but at the center stood a spire engraved with human DNA markers. Verified, indexed, and impossibly ancient. Is from the Marnie's ruins, Susan said. We found it a year ago, before the council forced us to stop digging. I didn't know what it meant. Not then. She swiped her hand. A second image appeared. An internal scan of the Zephyrian dreadnought. Destroyed near Europa. Its weapon system was enhanced with dark crystal arrays far beyond normal Zephyrian tech. Ran the data through cross-reference algorithms. These two systems, this ruin and this ship, they're linked. Identical power curves. Identical quantum lattice. Jake leaned in. You're telling me they're using weapons based on our ruins? Susan hesitated. I'm telling you, they're using our past. And someone helped them. Before Jake could respond, the bridge alarm sounded. Unidentified warp signature edge. Of the system. Mass displacement extreme. Carol Hughes' voice came through, tight and controlled. Captain, you need to see this. Jake was on the bridge in seconds. On the forward display, space was folding. Not in the way a normal ship warped in, no clean flash, no smooth arc. This was wrong. Like space was bending under pressure. Like it didn't want to let something through. Then the distortion ruptured. And the Crystal Vanguard emerged. It was not a ship. It was a living force of nature, 5 kilometers long, shaped like a blade wrapped in flowering crystal. Its surface pulsed with light, shifting colors and patterns that hurt the human eye. Some parts looked grown organic vines of energy and diamond. Others looked designed geometric, almost Terran. The bridge went silent. Crystallin hegemony flagship, Beth Turner whispered. They just violated the Council's Neutrality Act. Why? Jake asked, already knowing the answer. Lisa's voice was hard. Because they're scared, and they want us gone. The Crystal Vanguard hovered in orbit near Callisto casting, a shadow across the moon. Then it spoke, or rather he did. A face appeared on the view screen, tall, angular, shimmering like light refracted through ice. War Leader Vexenol. His expression was calm, but his crystal skin pulsed with battle colors. Terran vessel, he said in a voice like shattering glass. Your weapons impress, but they are crude. You wield fragments of something you do not understand. Jake stood tall. And I suppose you do? We remember, Vexenol said. We remember when the humans were gods and when they fell. We remember what they tried to bury. He leaned closer. Surrender your vessel. We will study it before it is destroyed. Jake raised his hand. Cut the channel. The view snapped back to the Crystal Vanguard, which had begun to move. Captain, said Amy, her tone rising, they're not locking weapons. They're bending the gravity well around us. Artificial gravity directed externally. The Stormbreaker groaned. The hull creaked like metal under an ocean. They're trying to crush us, Lisa said, from the outside in. Engines to full reverse, Jake ordered. Tony kinetics, high angle. Target exposed junctions. Tony fired. The rods launched. But the Crystal Vanguard changed shape mid-flight, opening a void in its body that let the projectiles pass harmlessly through. They're phasing their hull around our shots. Danny shouted. They're adapting. Jake slammed a fist into the console. We need to change the fight. It was Matt Taylor, head of ship security, who said it next. Captain, we board it. Everyone stared. You want to board that? Amy asked. Matt pointed to his screen. There. We've been reading secondary biosignatures near the gravity cores. That's where the ship is controlled. If we can reach those systems, disable them, we stop the ship from healing or adapting. Jake looked at him. You're volunteering? Matt grinned. Hell yes, sir. 10 minutes later, Stormbreaker launched boarding pod sleek torpedoes with Terran Marines inside, fired straight at the Crystal Vanguard soft zones. They pierced the outer crystal layer, burrowed in, and deployed fast response teams. Inside, the crystalline ship was a labyrinth of shifting halls and glowing veins. The Marines pushed through, weapons scanning and firing, their suits adapting. in real time to gravity distortions. Matt's voice came through, labored but clear. Captain, we found it. The control chamber. There's something else here. Jake leaned in. What? There was a pause. Then, human symbols, sir. Ancient ones. Mixed into the crystalline tech. We're in a ship that was built by both. By them and U.S. On the bridge, Susan Lee went pale. No, she whispered. Not built by both, built together. Before anyone could respond, War Leader Vexenol reappeared on the screen. His expression had changed. Not fury.shock, human, he said slowly. How did you unlock the ancient seals? Those codes are not known to this age. Jake stared at him. We didn't unlock them. They recognized us. Vexenol's colors dimmed. He took a step back. Impossible. You were supposed to be gone, all of you. Jake's voice was ice. We're not gone. We're home. The crystalline warship fled into folded space, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt like a held breath. No pursuit. No final volley. They simply vanished after the control cores of their living ship responded to human DNA. Captain Jake. Morrison stood at the front of the Stormbreaker's bridge, hands locked behind his back. His eyes weren't on the stars anymore. They were on the reflection of himself in the glass. A warship commander. A Terran patriot. But now, possibly something more, something ancient. Around him, the bridge hummed with activity. Silent, efficient. Taut like a drawn bow. Matt Taylor's team is back on board, said Beth Turner. They recovered samples from the control core. Dr. Lee's already started analysis. Damage report? Jake asked. Lisa Bennett answered from engineering. Shields held at 60%. Hull integrity optimal. The Vanguard's gravity field stressed the frame but didn't compromise it. Honestly, we built this ship like... We remembered how. Jake glanced at her. Maybe we did. Amy Foster swiveled from the AI console, brows furrowed. Captain. Communications from the colonies. A lot of them. Beth turned. Sir, they're not just calling. They're organizing, forming defense militias, repeating one phrase. Jake raised an eyebrow. What phrase? Beth hesitated. The ancients have returned. The galaxy must be warned. The words hung in the air like prophecy. A chime sounded. New alert, unauthorized transmissions intercepted. Alien comes traffic, Amy said. Encrypted, but we're inside their protocol libraries now. The main screen shifted. Dozens of alien species counselors, military officers, science envoys were screaming at each other in open diplomatic channels. The humans were supposed to be extinct. They've awakened ruins on colony worlds. We found similar signatures on Avalon, on Sarnath. They were always more than they seemed. We ignored the signs. And then, the Council of Voices must be consulted. That last line stopped. Jake cold. He turned slowly to Dr. Susan Lee, who had just entered the bridge, face pale, eyes wide. She was holding a small cube-shaped artifact recovered from the Crystal Vanguard. Did I hear that right? Jake asked. Council of Voices? Susan nodded. I've found that name before. In the ruins, she placed the artifact on the console. The surface rippled, projecting a hologram. Not a message. A map. Not of Terran space. Not of Zephyrian or Crystallin space, but of the Galactic Core. I've been comparing the symbols we found aboard the Crystal Vanguard with this ancient map from Marnie's station, she said. It's not theoretical. Anymore. There was a civilization older than the Council, older than the current powers, and humans were part of it. Jake frowned. How long ago? Susan's voice was steady. 4,000 years, maybe more. You're saying we ruled the center of the galaxy? No, she said quietly. I'm saying we built it. The silence that followed was broken only by the low hum of engines. Carol Hughes turned from navigation. Captain, you need to see this. The screen changed again, a feed from a deep-range Terran. Survey Probe 1 of the autonomous scouts seated long ago and long forgotten. It showed a ring structure orbiting a dead star. Miles wide, covered in what looked like ivy made of metal and ice. But more importantly, carved into the metal were symbols Terran script, stylized, ancient but legible. Haven 9, Beth gasped. Haven stations, those are myths. Susan looked stunned. They were real. And that one is near the Nexus Prime system, just inside the Galactic Core perimeter. Jake straightened. Plot a course. Danny Kim turned from his console, shocked. Sir, the core's a death zone. It's patrolled by all three major empires. If we go there, then we go through them, Jake said. If the core holds the truth of what we were, we take the Stormbreaker and find it. Amy hesitated. You really think the galaxy will let us just waltz in and reclaim our past? Jake looked at the Stormbreaker's hull reflected in the display. A ghost of humanity's legacy, rebuilt in secret. They won't. That's why we're bringing the biggest, angriest Hurricane-class battleship ever built. He turned to Beth. Send a transmission to Earth. Say nothing classified. Just 2 words. Beth raised an eyebrow. Which words? Jake smiled thin, grim, determined. Coming home. The Stormbreaker jumped to hyperspace, a ripple of blue light trailing behind her like a comet. On the edge of the Galactic Core, deep within shadowed systems, ancient monitoring stations flickered to life, some built by hands no longer known. To history, others dormant since before recorded time got one signal pulse. One word blinked into consciousness across silent archives buried beneath a dozen civilizations. Return. Far across the void, in the throne chamber of the biocollectives. My Nexus, the voice of 1,000 minds merged into one. They awakened the old stars. The silence is ending. Prepare the defense. The jump into the Galactic Core wasn't smoothed out. It felt like falling through the bones of a dead god. The Stormbreaker burst out of hyperspace with a shuddering roar, its shields rippling with spatial distortion. The stars here were wrong closer. Older, colder, some burned red with fury. Others pulsed in strange rhythms, flickering like ancient beacons across the abyss. They were not alone. Captain, said Carol Hughes, gripping her console, I've got energy signatures massive, and they're not coming from any known planets. Jake Morrison stood unmoving at the center of the bridge. His uniform was sharp, his voice steady, but his eyes flickered with something deeper now, knowing. Where are they coming from? Carol magnified the feed. Across the void, hanging in perfect orbital formation around a dwarf star, were the stations of Haven, monolithic constructs, black, silver, and gold, each the size of a small moon. Not spherical, not Terran in any modern sense, but familiar. Covered in latticed spires, immense platforms, rotating arms like planetary rings, all dormant, yet somehow watching. They didn't look abandoned. They looked like they were waiting. Lisa Bennett's voice was hushed. Those aren't space stations, they're cities. Susan Lee was already scanning with everything she had. Biosignatures are faint, but present. Power systems are inert, but not decayed. These structures haven't been forgotten. They've been preserved. Tony Rodriguez leaned over his console. Incoming message. On a frequency not used in ever. It's not council bandwidth. Not even alien. Jake raised his hand. Put it through. A voice filled the bridge. Human. Unmistakably human. But old, not aged, but timeless. With an accent that belonged to no continent Earth had ever known. Welcome, children of Earth. You have arrived at the Nexus Prime Arcology. Identify yourselves for record activation. Everyone froze. Jake spoke. Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Federation ship Stormbreaker. We seek answers. There was a pause. Then, identity. Confirmed. Genetic markers verified. Lineage. Core born. Access granted. Awakening protocol initiated. Across the starscape, lights bloomed. All at once. The Haven stations began to glow, blue lines racing across their surfaces like blood in artificial veins. Doors opened. Docking arms extended. Entire orbital rings shifted into new configurations. Machines awoke. Atmospheres cycled. Engines warmed. A symphony of resurrection filled the void. It was like watching history inhale. Sir, Amy said softly, we're not visitors. We're heirs. The Stormbreaker moved toward the largest habitat. It wasn't flying. It was being pulled, as if drawn home by hands too vast to see. As they approached, enormous gates opened before them, revealing a docking bay big enough to swallow a fleet. Then the voice returned. Prepare for interface. High command awaits. Jake turned to Susan. Thoughts? Susan was white-faced, trembling. If this is what I think it is, we're about to meet people who haven't spoken to the galaxy in 4,000 years. The Stormbreaker docked. Aboard the station, gravity normalized. Air pressure matched Terran standards. Lights pulsed softly along the corridor as the crew stepped off their ship and into a world untouched by time. What greeted them was not dust and ruin. It was perfection. White hallways of crystalline alloy, glowing walls of scrolling text, open forums with star maps projected above living trees. Statues lined the central chamber, each bearing the face of a human. Not aliens. Humans. Jake paused in front of one. The inscription read, Admiral Nyla Voss, last of the Starburn. Then came footsteps. A door opened. From it emerged a figure, in gleaming armor etched with runes. His face was pale, lined, but strong. He carried no weapon, but his presence was sharp as any blade. I am Admiral Marcus Stone, commander of the Eternal Watch, he said. You are late, Jake stepped forward. You've been waiting? For 4,000 years, Stone said. Since the day we erased ourselves. The briefing room was vast stars swirling in holographic displays as Stone told them everything. Once, humanity had ruled the stars, not through conquest, but as the architects of peace. A civilization that stretched from the core to the rim. Scientists, artists, warriors, diplomats. They had built the Galactic Council before it was hijacked by lesser empires. They had seeded the worlds with technology, lifted species from savagery, and watched over them like shepherds. But then they came, the Devourers, beings from outside the galaxy, not ships, not organisms. Inversions, things that bent the laws of physics to unmake civilizations. They consumed thought, memory, culture, not just death erasure, and the only way to stop them had been terrible. We built the weapons, Stone said, but they cost everything. To use them safely, we scattered. We fractured our empire. We wiped ourselves from records. We became ghosts to survive. He looked at Jake. You, Captain, are the first signal we've had that the bloodline survived. That Earth wasn't just a decoy, it was a seed. Jake exhaled. And now? Stone turned to the star maps. Now the galaxy's waking up, and the ones who feared us most, they're watching. On the Stormbreaker's bridge, Beth Turner picked up a sudden spike in communications. Alien fleets, Crystallin, Zephyrian, Biocollective all moving. Dozens of ships. Hundreds. Thousands. They're converging on Nexus Prime, she whispered. It's not a patrol. It's a siege fleet. Jake turned to Stone. You've had 4,000 years. How many ships do you have? Stone smiled. Enough. Behind them, ancient shipyards lit up. Silhouettes emerged, sleek, curved, pulsing, with starfire engines. Warships built not just for power but for poetry, armored with metaphysics, armed with truth. A voice filled the docking chamber. This is the voice of the Eternal Watch. Stand by for deployment. Let the galaxy witness the return of the Terran core. And in the black above Nexus Prime, the second storm began to gather. They called it the final cleansing. 2,000 ships, 3 empires, and a singular mission: erase the Terran threat before it could awaken fully. The fleets of the Zephyrian Empire, the Crystallin hegemony, and the biocollective Dark Envy. Sky above Nexus Prime like an eclipse of steel and crystal. Ships so vast they blotted out stars, their formation perfect, their weapons prime dot in the heart of their command network. Admiral Kether stood aboard his flagship, his serpentine features awash in pale blue light. His skin glowed with war colors, orange. Streaks of rage, crimson veins of purpose. Begin orbital bombardment in 3 minutes, he commanded. No warnings. No speeches. The humans will die in silence. He turned to the projected images of his fellow leaders. Empress Shalandra, her crystalline body refracting starlight in 1,000 sharp angles, nodded from her throne chamber. Queen Mind Nexus, a hive of trillions, spoke with one voice. The ancient infection must not be allowed to return. None of them knew what was already awake beneath the surface of Nexus Prime. None of them knew what had been waiting. On the bridge of the TFS Stormbreaker, Captain Jake Morrison stood motionless, surrounded by his officers, staring out the forward viewport. Beyond it, the ancient Terran habitat flickered with light, no longer dormant, no longer forgotten, and behind it, the fleet thousands of years old, buried, hidden in folded space. Stored as data in the bones of the station itself, now? Awake. Sir, said Beth Turner, her voice almost trembling. We're detecting ships, hundreds, maybe more. Their signals are coming from inside the void layer. They're forming. God, whispered Lisa, they had dimensional storage. Whole fleets folded between layers of space. Susan Lee stepped forward, her eyes wide with awe. The Eternal Watch wasn't just symbolic. It was literal. They've kept everything ready. All these millennia. Visual, Jake said. The screen changed. From the shadowed halo of Nexus Prime's primary ring, ships emerged not born, but summoned. Crafted from living metal, silver black, and pulsing with golden veins. Each hull bore the seal of the Terran Core, a burning star encircled by 12 rings, each one representing a sector long thought lost to time. The largest of these ships, the Ascendant Flame, moved into formation beside the Stormbreaker. Its shape was unlike anything in the galaxy. It had no engines visible, no hard points, no obvious hull. It looked like a concept made manifest, part blade, part cathedral, part star. Admiral Marcus Stone's face appeared on the screen. No armor. Now only the uniform of a soldier long past the age of fame, and now standing in the age of reckoning. Captain Morrison, he said, voice steady as bedrock. They have brought the storm. Let us remind them who named it. And with that, the Terran fleet moved. Above them, the combined alien empires opened fire, beams of antimatter, waves of crystalline missiles. Planetary-scale gravity pulses all converged on the ancient human habitat like divine wrath. It should have turned to dust. Instead, the station absorbed it. Wave after wave of energy vanished against the shimmering skin of the structure, dissipated into radiant clouds of harmless light. Ancient technology turned entropy into art. Then came the response. Jake turned to Amy Foster. Fire control. Link our targeting array with the Ascendant Flame. Let them feel what truth looks like. The weapons didn't look like weapons. They looked like judgment. Gravity spines reached across space and froze enemy ships mid-warp, ripping them from faster-than-light motion into stillness. Power drainers lanced out, reducing entire battle groups to drifting metal. Some ships didn't explode, they disassembled, reduced to components by nanoweapons carried in quantum fields. The Crystallin flagship tried to retaliate Empress Shalandra's pride, a vessel grown over 5 centuries. Stormbreaker turned toward it. Kinetic rods fired not as projectiles, but as timed warp anomalies. The rods appeared inside the ship, inside the shield, and then it was gone. The biocollective swarmed organisms piloting living ships. Dr. Paul Wright, overseeing tactical biocoms, uploaded a tailored neurological disruption pulse. The swarm turned on itself, hive minds collapsing. Screams across the void. "Captain," Beth said, stunned. "We've neutralized over 60% of the fleet in 5 minutes. And sir, they're trying to retreat." On the alien command channels, panic was spreading like wildfire. The humans are not using weapons. They're rewriting reality. We were told they were broken. This is a god race. Admiral Kether's face appeared on the screen. The pride was gone now. Only fury and fear. This is not over, human. You cannot stand against the entire galaxy. Jake stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. Then you'd better bring more ships. Because 2,000 wasn't nearly enough. The Terran fleet didn't pursue. They didn't need to. The alien armadas broke apart, fragmenting like the lies they'd built their empires on. Silence fell. The galaxy had changed. Not with a declaration, but with a single truth. Humanity had returned, and they had never been what the galaxy assumed. On the galactic communication channels, every species listened. Not to a threat, but to a choice. From the Stormbreaker's bridge, Captain Jake Morrison spoke. "We are not conquerors. We are not gods. We are the ones who gave up power to save you. And we are back not to rule, but to remind you what courage looks like." In the ancient halls of Nexus Prime, councils were formed. In the worlds of the biocollective, genetic archives reeled in shock. In the halls of crystalline memory, old songs began to play, songs about guardians. And across the stars, children of species who had never known the truth began to hope. The storm had passed, but in its wake, the galaxy stood still, not in peace. Not yet, but in awe. The battlefield above Nexus Prime had gone quiet. Alien warships, those not destroyed or captured, had powered down, their crews stunned into silence. Where a death sentence had been issued, they now floated, motionless before the impossible. The Terran fleet did not chase them. It didn't need to. The Stormbreaker, scarred but defiant, hovered in the shadow of the ancient haven stations. Flanked by ships birthed from memory and folded space, it stood as the spear point of a civilization reborn. But Captain Jake Morrison wasn't celebrating. He stood in the war chamber of Nexus Prime's central command spire, staring at a projection of the galaxy, the whole galaxy laid out like a neural map of light. Each glowing line represented a decision yet to be made. Each flicker was a world watching, listening, waiting. He wasn't alone. Admiral Marcus Stone, commander of the Eternal Watch, stood beside him. Across from them sat the emissaries of 3 empires. A crystalline dignitary carved of luminous sapphire. A bioform sphere pulsing with millions of minds from the biocollective. And a quiet Zephyrian priest, whose scales had turned neutral gray. They were not the rulers. They were the survivors, the ones brave enough to ask why they had been so desperate to keep the Terrans in chains. Jake broke the silence first. "We could have destroyed all of you," he said, his voice calm but implacable. "But we didn't, not because we're merciful, because we remember why we gave up power in the first place." Stone added, "We watched you for 4,000 years, protected your borders, shielded you from the remnants of the Devourers, even when you didn't know. and still you feared us. The Zephyrian emissary lowered his head. Because we inherited lies. We were taught that humanity died in madness, that you tore yourselves apart in greed and fire. The Crystallin representative shimmered. But it was sacrifice, a self-exile to save all others. The biocollective pulsed with low light. We see it now. The silence we thought meant death was instead devotion. Jake walked toward the star map. You want to know what happens next? Whether we crown ourselves kings. Whether we unleash these ships on your worlds. He tapped a control. The map shifted planets lit up across Terran space. Colonies once isolated, now in contact. Refugees of centuries reaching out across systems. You're asking the wrong question. Beth Turner's voice came in through the open comms. Captain, receiving wideband messages. Dozens of species. Some are requesting alliances. Others are surrendering out of fear. Most are asking for guidance. Jake looked at the gathered. Aliens, we don't want to lead empires. We want to stop this from ever happening again. Marcus Stone stepped forward, his eyes blazing. The Devourers are not dead. Their servants remain. Scattered, hidden, influencing policy from the dark. One galaxy is not enough for them. They consume realities. Jake nodded. We fought them once. And we're preparing to fight them again. But this time, we're not doing it alone. The biocollective shifted. What are you proposing? Jake's voice was steady. A new alliance. Not ruled by humans. Not ruled by anyone. A council not of superiority, but of service. One that protects history rather than rewriting it. A place where truth isn't feared, but taught. He paused. We have the means. You have the numbers. Together, we can make sure no species has to sacrifice itself to save the rest. Ever again. The room fell quiet. Then the Crystallin emissary stood, bowed not in submission, but in respect. We will join you, she said. And if you are lying, if you betray this promise, we will fight you. But I do not believe you are. The Zephyrian added, we owe our children more than fear. We will participate. But we will watch you closely. The biocollective's voice echoed deep and layered. We have already begun reformatting our history files. You will have access, as equals. Jake smiled. Then let's build something the Devourers can't understand. Unity without control. Power without tyranny. Memory without fear. 3 weeks later, in the orbit of a once-forgotten world, the Galactic Accord of Nexus Prime was signed. Representatives from 184 species gathered aboard the massive station known as Sanctum One built. Atop the Haven Foundations, reborn with joint construction crews. Not as a throne world. As a symbol. The ancient Terran technology was not hoarded. It was shared, replicated, taught. Scientists wept when seeing what had been lost. Engineers begged to join Terran teams to help rebuild forgotten wonders. And children on alien worlds looked up at the stars and saw humanity not as a threat, but as guardians. The Terran Federation did not dissolve. It did not expand into an empire. Instead, it anchored the Accord's defense fleet. Its most powerful ships lent in service to all. The Stormbreaker, once a myth, became the flagship of peace. But not all agreed. Some factions, remnants of older empires, refused to join. Some whispered that the Devourers were watching. That something old and vast stirred in the dark between galaxies. And so humanity did what it had always done when given the impossible choice. They prepared. Jake Morrison was promoted to Admiral. Lisa Bennett oversaw the new Nexus Engine Initiative, a program designed to upgrade peaceful fleets with gravity-neutral core drives. Tony Rodriguez trained alien tacticians in asymmetric warfare theory. Amy Foster and Dr. Susan Lee opened the Galactic Institute of Memory. where ancient Terran data was unlocked, preserved, and taught freely to all. And across the stars, mixed crews of humans, aliens, and hybrids served together on the edge of known space. Some patrolled, some explored, some watched. And on the edge of that frontier, one ship always flew first, the Stormbreaker, faster than light, built from memory, powered by hope. Admiral Morrison's final log entry before the first deep-range expedition read, "We are not returning to our old empire. That era is over. This time we go forward together. Not as rulers, not as relics, but as a storm reborn not to destroy, but to shield. And if the darkness rises again, we will be there. First in, last out. Because that's who we are." Humanity had come home, but now the real journey was just beginning.